week for a variety of reasons, and I don't usually do a Friday morning update, but I felt really led to do this today. It's going to be just a little bit different from what I usually share, but I'll just get right to it. Um, One of the promises of God that has been most meaningful to me in the last, probably 2 years or so, for some reason, it has taken on a special place in my life. Good morning, Susan. Is the promise that God will never leave us or forsake us. Uh, this shows up multiple places in Scripture, but let me just show you uh, the one that's probably best known. And that's out of the New Testament book of Hebrews, chapter 13. And in chapter 13, verse 5, uh, God says, and it's actually a quote. The scripture says here, "For God has said," and then these words, "I will never leave you or forsake you." And that gets translated a variety of ways. I'll never fail you. I'll never abandon you. But there's some really interesting things about that make it even more rich and amazing than it would at first appear, as amazing as it is just on the surface. For starters, as I mentioned, it's a quote. So in that case, the writer of Hebrews, and we don't know who the writer of Hebrews is, um, he references Deuteronomy chapter 31. And in Deuteronomy chapter 31, actually two verses out of Deuteronomy 31, verse 6 and also verse 8. Let me just turn to that real quickly. Okay. So Deuteronomy 31, verse 6 is this. God is talking to Joshua. He says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, and do not panic before them, for the Lord your God will personally go ahead of you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you." And then when you drop down to verse 8, he says pretty much the same thing. "Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He will be with you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you." Now, it may seem like he's just giving kind of unnecessary repetition right there, but that's not true. I want you to look real carefully at the specifics that are named in those two verses. Be strong and courageous. So if he's telling you to be strong, what's he addressing? He's addressing weakness, when you are aware of the fact that you're weak. When he says to be courageous, what's he addressing? He's addressing cowardice. He's addressing that temptation to pull back from what we know we ought to do. He says, don't be afraid. So clearly he's addressing fear. And do not panic. That's an interesting thing, because panic is fear in a different way. You can live with sort of a low grade fear about things, or even a high grade fear, but not panic. But panic is when you just lose your cool and you begin to do very foolish and useless things, even counterproductive things. And he says the solution to all of that, the antidote to all of that, is to realize that the Lord your God will personally go ahead of you. He is with you, and he will neither fail you nor abandon you. And those are not the same things. He didn't just say the same thing twice. Two very important facets of God's ongoing, abiding presence in your life. One is he won't abandon you. He's with you always. He's absolutely committed to sharing his life with you. He never pulls away for a moment. Now, that's awesome in and of itself. But I have people in my life who I believe are deeply committed to me, and they love me, and they've made promises to me. My wife, of course, top of the list, but some other wonderful people too. And I've done the same thing. I've made promises to her and to others. And I'll be with them, and they'll be with me till the end. But just because they're with me, as awesome as that is, doesn't mean they won't fail me. And it sure doesn't mean that I won't fail them. I will sometimes fail them. I might try my best to not be able to do what they need in those moments. I might misunderstand the whole situation. I may make wrong decisions or wrong calls, whatever the case might be. But what I love is that in this case, God says, listen, I'm going to personally be with you. And not only will I be with you, I won't fail you. Whatever I do will be the right thing. Whatever you need from me, I will be that for you in the face of your weakness or your cowardice, your fear or your panic. You need to turn to me and let yourself become aware of my unfailing, constant presence. And then verse 8, he says, don't be afraid or discouraged. Now, he already addressed fear, but now he throws in another one, discouragement. He says, I don't want you to be discouraged. I want you to be encouraged. And the solution for, the antidote for the discouragement in your life, it isn't just good self-help books, which, by the way, many of them have profoundly influenced my life. It isn't just good conversations with friends or reading positive things or no. He says, he's very specific here. He says, don't be discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He will be with you. He will neither fail you or abandon you. In other words, God says it's my presence at work in your life that will bring you out of discouragement. Now, with that being said, let's go back to the passage in Hebrews. The Passion Translation puts it like this: I will never leave you, never, and I will not loosen my grip on your life. That is such a cool thing. In the Aramaic, that is written as, my hand will never loosen on you. God has you in an amazingly strong grip, And he says, I will never loosen my grip on you. He bought you. He paid for you with his blood. He has shared his life with you. You are his prized daughter or son. He is passionate about you. He is not going to let go of you for 1 second. He won't let go of you. I don't know if you've ever had the experience, but as a dad, many times, and as a grandfather now, many times over the years, kids would be, in fact, it just happened last week. Kids were going up on, playground equipment or trying to climb a tree or something like that, something that takes them out of their comfort zone, something that gets them up a little higher than usual, something where they're having to stretch their little legs for the next rung on that playground structure or whatever, and they start getting fearful. But I've got my hands on them the whole time, and they're panicking at times. In fact, at times they'll start to cry, I want down. And I'll take them down, but I'll say, I had you. And they have no idea. They might weigh 30 pounds or something. It's nothing for me to hold them securely. But they begin to doubt that I really was going to keep them in my grip. If they had only been able to trust that, they could have had all the fun in the world. They could have climbed unbelievably high. They could have gotten to certain levels so much more quickly than they did. But they were afraid that my grip wasn't enough. I find myself like that with the Lord sometimes. I think we all do, where we somehow forget that the weight of our lives and the weight of our fears and the weight of our pasts and the weight of our brokenness or illness or struggles, it is nothing for our God. He is big and strong and infinitely powerful, and his grip will never, ever weaken on us as long as we entrust ourselves to him. As long as we entrust ourselves to him, we are absolutely unshakable. So I just want you to do this as I close this out this morning. Once you shut this off, would you just for a moment, shut your phone down, close the computer, whatever, and just with your eyes closed, out loud, ask Jesus this question. Jesus, since you're with me right now, what would you like for me to know? Or what would you like for me to hear? What would that be? And see what he says to you. And I can tell you from experience, he will say amazing things to you in those moments. He will give you some very precious things. You could ask him things like this. So, it's still relatively early in the day. Jesus, since you're going to be with me all day, what are we going to do? I mean, I know what's on my schedule, but I'm talking about just me and you. What do you have in store for me today? Ask him some friendship questions, and then just be quiet. Just wait in his presence, and let him begin to talk to you. Let him begin to give you the awesome blessing of feeling his presence in your life, the one who is the antidote for fear and discouragement, for panic, for worry. Let him minister his presence to you. I hope that helps. I hope it's a blessing to you. And I hope to connect with you all one way or the other on Sunday. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.